going to tie up a kind of a variation on the yellow Sally fly. I've got a size 10 stimulator hook here in the vise. I'm just going to use some kind of cream yellow 14-aught thread here. I'm not too worried about build up on this one because it's a pretty large fly. So I'm going to go ahead and get that secured and drop my whip finisher on the ground and go ahead and cut off that end here. So it's just kind of a fun pattern to tie. And it works great as a stimulator, and it's really more of a yellow color, which is why I'm using kind of the lighter color thread. And I'm just going to lay some thread wraps around down here to about to where the barb would be if the hook had a barb on it, but I've taken the barb off of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of a hot spot, red hot spot tail on the end of it. So I'm just going to use some red floss like this, and we'll just go ahead and tie it in just like so. So I'm going to just get a couple of turns on it just like so. And then I'm just going to pull it back, draw it backwards with my hand to kind of just get it so I don't need to cut it. Then I'm just going to go down and secure it about where I want that hot spot to start. And I'm going to come back up and just kind of clean things up a little bit. So I'm going to want to take my thread now back down towards the back end because I'm going to need to tie off this hot spot after I'm done putting it in place. And I'm actually going to use my bobbin cradle here. I'm not going to put a knot in or a half hitch in. I just want the thread a little bit more out of my way so I can wrap this now secured red floss here around the bottom here. And I'm just going to take that a little ways down around the bend of the hook. That's good enough, right about there. And then I'm going to have it taper a little bit, so we'll go ahead and take kind of some touching wraps, just going back and forth a couple of times each time. So to get the taper, we're just going to go a little bit less deep than the previous wrap. Then we'll come back up again. And that's enough hot spot for me. I'm not too worried about the fact that I've taken that thread up a little bit, up the shank of the hook, because we're going to be tying over the top of it anyway. So at this point, my main objective is just to secure that thread, or that floss, the red floss there in place. With just a couple of thread turns is all it's going to really take. I'm going to take my thread back down because I do want a hot spot. I just don't want it quite that long. So we've got our little red hot spot kind of in place at this point. Though not typical, I suppose, on this particular pattern, I'm actually going to rib this a little bit in the dubbing, and to rib it, I'm just going to use some chartreuse ultra wire in the brassy size. And we'll just go ahead and tie that and secure that onto our hook at this point, so we'll have it available for us to use as ribbing. And we'll just come back down the hook here, and then I'll draw that material back as well, just to give me a little bit of extra length. And from that point, I'm going to just come down to about where I want this pattern to start. So we're ready at this point. I'm going to go ahead and grab my wax and wax this thread up just a hair. Get the big globs off of it and get it worked in there. And for dubbing, I'm just going to use, this is a kind of a lighter shade of yellow. I'm not using the bright yellow for this pattern. I'm just going to use this kind of more of a dull, and it's Beaver Dubbing by Wapsi, and it's going to be a little bit buggy. I don't mind some of that bugginess, but I'm gonna dub this pretty tight as I move up the hook, and we'll probably have to take a couple of passes with this dubbing as we work our way up the hook. So now I'm just getting that dubbing ready to go, just like so. I'm going to bring it up to my thread. I'm just going to finger dub this. I'm not going to use a dubbing loop. can see how thick, or you probably can't, but the end of it is pretty thick, but we'll tighten this up as we kind of go along. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and pull that dubbing up a little bit to give me some bare thread, which just allows me to travel back down to where I want this body to start without any buildup, because it's just thread. So we'll take our first thread wrap, or our wrap of dubbing there, and then we'll just kind of, methodically work our way up the shank of the hook here. And we're going to have a taper on this, just a, kind of a subtle little taper, but a taper nonetheless. So you'll see that I'll do some wraps and then wrap back over the top of what I just wrapped. And that's just to help create that taper that we're looking for here. And this is not going to go all the way up to the top or to the front of the fly. At least not yet. We'll actually tie on some other dubbing to do that. So you can see that's moderately buggy. And I am going to just, like I said, I'd probably take a couple passes at it. I think this time I'm only going to take 2 passes at it. I think this next bunch will be enough to get me where I want to be. So just grab another little bunch of the dubbing here, and I'm going to finger dub it also onto my thread here, like so. Kind of spread that out a little bit more. Pull some of those fibers back down, but I'm just going to take a few wraps backwards, like so, and then I'm going to come back up forwards again, and that's going to help us with the taper that we're looking for here. And for me, that's going to work. So we've got this part we've almost got the abdomen finished on the fly, but we've got to just wrap our chartreuse wire up through here to kind of give it a little hint of a ribbing. So I'm just going to take that right on up the body here. Try to make kind of evenly spaced wraps that maybe get a little bit further spread apart as we work our way up. And I will pull this down a little bit tight because it'll just help that dubbing kind of pop out a little bit more and give that segmented look that we're trying to get here. So I've got that right up here. I'm going to just go ahead and take my thread and throw it over the top a couple of times, and then I'm going to take a few wraps on this side, and then we'll just use our helicopter method and kind of spin this around and let that come off. So next we're going to tie in our wing, and I'm going to just turn to my bleached deer hair. I'm going to want to cut this off really close to the skin, because I'm going to want these, because this hook is a little bit longer than when I'm tying like a 14 or 16 or 18 Caddis fly. We're tying a 10 here. So I need a little bit of extra length, so I'll go ahead and take advantage of clipping it off a little bit closer. So here we are. I've got my clump of deer hair, and it looks ugly as usual until you can see the fragments and the under hair in here, and we'll comb that out here with our little dubbing comb, because I don't want that under hair in here. I want to clean that out. Now I'm going to pinch it, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here. There's probably another good opportunity to just, talking about that hair stacking, and today I'm just going to use like my go-to, just a brass hair stacker. Has 2 pieces, a bottom and a top, and the top part of it is kind of flanged down to create kind of a way for these those fibers to go in there a little bit easier. And what you'll see here, this is before stacking my deer hair. It's all sorts of different lengths, and what I want this to be pretty straight on this side here, and that's what I'm going to use the hair stacker for. So I'm just going to load this right down the barrel of my my hair stacker like so. And it really is important. You're going to just tap, by the way, you're going to hold this up just vertically like this and tap it a little bit on the table. But taking that under fur out is really important if you really want to get this secured nicely to your hook. So that should be good enough, and I'll just turn my stacker horizontal now and just carefully remove the bottom, and I'm holding on to the top, and hopefully you can see now I've got tips that are pretty well aligned. I'm going to pinch those really tight because I don't want to lose that alignment. Then I'm going to switch hands again, take a look at what I've got, and hopefully you can see that those are much better in much better alignment. So at this point I want to take a measurement. I want this wing to just barely go over the bend of the hook. So that's where I need to cut this material off. So I'm just going to take that pinched in my fingers, go ahead and cut those butt ends off. So we have something that looks just about like that. I'm going to rotate my thread counterclockwise. And again, the reason I'm doing that is you can see now my thread is moving backwards towards this end of the hook is what I want it to do. It'll make it much easier for that to grab hold of those fibers there. And then I'm just going to pull down fairly tight and watch that nice little head kind of pop up there. And I'll take a look, and that wing looking out the back there is looking about where I want it. So I'm just going to keep that kind of held in place and go ahead and take some thread wraps up through that. The next material that I'm going to tie in is going to be the hackle, and that hackle is going to run through some additional dubbing that we'll put on at the front here. For me, at least for today, I kind of change this around, but I'm just going to use a ginger barred hackle feather. I think it'll just show up nicely through that yellow a little bit and not overpower it and not be too overly yellow. So I've already taken one of these feathers off of the hackle. You can see I've got it here in the stem. I've got it stripped, the fiber stripped off here. But I also have a few extra fibers stripped off the top. So that's what you want to do. And then as I put this in place, I want where it's stripped a little bit further on the top, I want that tied in facing upwards. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of sit this in place and take a nice thread wrap here and secure that in place. And we'll go ahead and pull the hackle towards the eye of the hook a little bit. Don't pull it too hard because you're not trying to pull it out. I'm just trying to get at least one wrap behind it as well as in front of it. So I've got that in place where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and continue up the hook shank here, and we'll just go ahead and clip that excess off. We have plenty of space to do exactly that. So there we go. And now I'm just going to bring my thread back up here because we're going to put some dubbing on before we tie our hackle in, or wrap our hackle up. Our hackle's already tied in. I'm going to go ahead and throw again a little bit more wax on my thread here for dubbing. And sometimes it gets goopy like that, so I'll go ahead and just run my fingers up and down that a little bit. We're going to actually go a little bit brighter here I'm going to use this little brighter yellow on the thorax here. And we'll want it to taper down towards the eye, thicker in the back and tapering down towards the eye of the hook. And remember, this is a stimulator, kind of streamer, kind of an idea. So bright colors are not your enemy by a long shot. So dub some of that on here, just like so. Take a few wraps back because I do want to make sure I get a few wraps here that covers up the kind of butt ends of my deer hair there. And then I'm just going to work my way slowly up towards the front of the hook. And you notice that's what I do. I typically will just reach in with my fingers and tighten it a little bit. We're going to add just a little bit more. And that should be more than enough right there. So I'm going to wrap back a little bit so that I can get that a little bit tightened down. I'm going to keep my dubbing tight by twisting it every time I go around until I get to just right behind the eye, right about there. And I don't need any more than that, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull that dubbing off there. And we'll swing in with our scissors here in a second and kind of clip off that mess a little bit before we do our wrap our hackle up. So I'm just going to, like I said, swing in here quickly with my scissors and get rid of some of those really long guard hairs that are sticking out. Got an extra long one back there that almost escaped. So just about like that. From there, I'm just kind of lick my fingers a little bit and pull all of that backwards, and that will just help clean up the head area here, just prior to us putting this, wrapping this hackle on. So I'm okay doing a few thread wraps here. I'm just trying to build up a little bit so we'll have a bit of a head on this. I'm just going to really quickly grab a hackle plier here. Just hold on to the very end of this hackle that we tied in a minute ago. I'm going to hold that straight up and down. Make sure that my deer hair is kind of out of the way there. I'm going to take one full wrap for sure, right around where that deer hair is. And from there, I'm going to take fairly open spirals, moving up towards the eyes. So they're not like really, really tight. So it's almost a bit of a ribbing that we have going on here. And I'm just going to patiently work my way up towards right behind the eye of the hook here, or at least where I'm going to put my head in. I'm just going to be about right about there. So we'll go ahead and let our thread off of our bobbin cradle. Keep our tension on our hackle here, not so much that it breaks as usual, but also not so loose that it comes undone. So I'm going to wiggle my thread, helps me keep from trapping quite so many fibers, and as I do that, you'll notice that I start pulling that hackle more towards the eye of the hook. That's the part that we're going to end up cutting off. So I want to secure it right at the stem, but I don't want to trap all of those fibers. So by leaning that a little bit forward like this while I do the wiggle back and forth with my thread, now I'm going to pull my hackle a little bit backwards, and I'm just going to take a wrap or two. And with that, I can let go with my hackle pliers. That's not going to go anywhere. So at this point, you've got a couple of options, and we're going to do it this way, where we could clip this out right now, but really I'm just going to pull everything a little bit backwards, and we're going to go ahead and take some wraps to secure all of this and build ourselves up a tiny little bit of a head, just like that. I could have clipped it off. Either way is fine. What I'm talking about clipping off is the extra bit that's left over. So you want to be really careful with this. I'm going to come in with my scissors. I want to pull this forward towards the eye, and I want to clip this as close to the shank of the hook as I possibly can. It's like so. Otherwise you'll have stem, and it just ends up not looking nearly as natural as what you're going to want it to look. From there, we're going to just go ahead and take a few more wraps here to kind of clean up that head a little bit. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and grab my whip finisher, and we'll go ahead and finish this fly off. I like this pattern a lot, and I like it tied this way a little bit better. Where it's got kind of the duller yellow in the back, brighter up by the thorax, but not so bright that it's outstanding. And I like using the ginger here. I do have a yellow hackle as well, but it makes it almost neon too bright, which I don't particularly care for. So the ginger matches well, and it gives you that ribbing. So there you go. After just a little bit of cleanup, there's your yellow Sally. Nice deer hair wing and a nice tapered body with the red hot spot. Nice hackling up front. Give it a shot. Love the pattern.